Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AMA podcast. My name is Matt Ruddick. As always, I'm your host, and I've got Tyler Dobbs here again this week. We wanted to come back for a second episode. We still had a lot of questions come in after last week's talk about remote ID and the latest FAA updates, and we wanted to kind of come back. It's been 10 days since the latest NPRM for remote ID went public and was published, and we've had some time to kind of digest some of it. And Tyler, I know you've had some time to sit and kind of read through it and help people understand. You've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. So we wanted to kind of do a little bit deeper dive than what we did before with some of the information that we now have and that sort of thing. So first, before we get started and kind of deep dive into this, Tyler, is there... it's been a week since we've talked before. Has there been anything that's really changed since then as far as, the FAA has now come out and said this, or we now feel this way about certain things? Is there anything major that's changed?
I don't think so. I mean, we knew that there was a number of issues with it as soon as we scanned through the proposed rule. Now that everybody's had a lot of time to digest it, we still recognize there are a number of issues. Sure. There are a couple things in there that are livable if they're reworked, but overall, I don't think that there's anybody out there that can read this proposed rule on remote ID and say, yeah, we can live with it. I know AMA certainly can't. So.
Yeah, and I know there's some things I would like to point out is there are a lot of misconceptions getting put out on social media. I'm seeing a lot of people saying that somehow we are happy with this.
No, God, no.
And that is not the case.
That's not the case. We're not happy with this rule. It needs to change. If it would go through as is, it would have a major impact on our hobby in a negative way. So we need to get our members engaged on this. We need to put some comments out there and start moving because this needs to be changed. For the hobby in general.
Pretty dramatically.
For the hobbyists, for the manufacturers, for the entire industry, we need to see some drastic changes to this rule before it becomes final.
Agreed. So let's break this down. Can you explain what this proposed rule says? In a way, picture me as a fifth grader, I guess, and kind of explain to me what does this rule say? Okay.
So basically the rule says that there are three options in which someone can satisfy the remote ID requirement should this proposed rule pass as is. And I want to stress that point. This is just a proposal from the FAA. Yeah. This is not a final rule. It doesn't go into effect as is. We have time to change it, and that's what this process and what this period is to change it. So, and before I get started on diving in, I will say that AMA has requested an extension on the comment period. The comment period 60 days. We've asked for an additional 30. I know there are a number of other organizations, both in the unmanned and manned world, who are asking for an extension. A lot of organizations have issues with this rule as is, so we hope to get those extra 30 days.
Is there any reason to believe that extension may not be granted?
I don't think so. I mean, it took the FAA 3 years to draft this. I mean, and delay after delay after delay, they come out with 319 pages and give us 60 days. Hopefully, they'll recognize that this is extremely important for the community, and they'll give us those extra 30 days.
I imagine those requests for an extension probably pretty common.
They are.
Yeah,
sure.
So. Okay.
So, but regardless, we'll make sure everybody knows. We'll be doing multiple pushes through email, social media, on your podcast. Yep. So as that final data comment gets closer, the call to action will get louder.
Right.
So, but diving into it, basically, there's three ways that you can satisfy the remote ID requirement through the proposed rule. One is the standard remote ID, which would require that the aircraft broadcast a signal and the location and identification of the aircraft while simultaneously connected to the internet and letting a USS, which is an unmanned aircraft service supplier, similar to Lance and and some of these other apps we have, there's going to be service suppliers who will be helping monitor where these aircraft are. So the standard would require both of those. Now you can fly under standard if you would lose internet connectivity and things like that. I won't get into the granular level of that, but basically they're asking those who are flying under standard that the aircraft send a signal out giving its location, identification information, and connected to the internet so these service suppliers can track the location. That allows for operations beyond line of sight, so commercial operations and things like that.
This is where like the Amazons and those types of people would potentially operate if all of this
Sure. And I could see, unfortunately, we don't feel like we should be into this category.
Right.
But as I explain some of the other categories, I could see where we would need to be because that's as I move into the limited remote ID, that talks about you need an internet connection basically to send that same information to these USS or service suppliers who are tracking your location and identification. Unfortunately, that sounds like a lesser requirement, which it is. You're not sending a signal, but you can only operate 400 feet from the control station, which is you with the transmitter.
And that's not just 400 feet
not
up.
Altitude.
That's a bubble.
That's 400 feet in any direction. So we have a lot of our community and people outside of our community who are operating beyond 400 feet from their control station. So that limited sounds like it's going to be less of a problem to meet that threshold or requirement. Unfortunately, it's just simply not going to work for everybody.
Right.
And internet connectivity across the country varies. That's going to be an issue. I know that I've talked to members over the last couple of weeks here, and they say, I can't use my cell phone at my house because I don't have any internet. Well, then you can't meet that limited. If it doesn't have internet, you can't connect, you can't take off and fly. Yep. So that's going to be a major issue. And then the third option would be these FRIA areas or fixed locations, fixed flying sites. That was something that AMA pushed for. We wanted to have that option of a fixed flying site capability. People think that that's the only option we push for. It certainly isn't. We understand that, probably half of our members fly at fixed sites and the other half don't. I don't know the exact number, but I know that there are a number of people who don't fly at fixed sites. You don't. I don't, certainly not all the time. So we don't want stuck to fixed flying sites.
We don't want that to be the only place you can fly.
But we want that option. We think that that's a safe option. It's worked for decades. So why don't we use it? Well, they included that. Unfortunately, they look to get rid of those fixed sites over time through attrition. Once the rule goes final and we get past all the grace periods and things like that, we'd have 12 months to request the flying site be exempt from remote ID. And then the club or whoever's operating from that fixed site would basically enter into an agreement to have that removed from a remote ID of a transponder internet requirement. But if the club moves locations after that 12-month period, if the MOU's not, they forget to sign that and renew that exemption, then that site's lost forever. You can't go back and request that site.
And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because that's something I'm seeing a lot of people talking about online, is the fact that after 12 months, you can no longer apply to be one of these FRIA sites.
Right. Sure.
And so that's an accurate interpretation of what the rule says.
That's right. You'll have a 12-month period. And we've been reaching out for support on that. We feel there a number of people outside of AMA community, other organizations said, listen, we have no problem with your site. We've been reaching out to manned organizations and unmanned both. They feel like that's a good permanent solution. I'm sure the FAA doesn't want to get involved in the approval of flying site locations. Unfortunately, they have to do that through the statute on some of our sites with letters of agreement already and things like that. So I understand that it's probably a pain point for them, but they ask for this. So,
I was like, they put it in there.
Right? Yeah, we would be happy to just take back managing our own community, and they can go back to whatever they were doing before. But they asked for this, so they need to make some reasonable adjustments to accommodate us. A fixed flying site location is a safe solution that should be permanent, not one that they view that, hey, we'll do it for a little while, but over time we're going to get those removed.
Right.
And back to limited, there's solutions that would make limited a possibility that we could live with. And that's what this comment period is for, is let's point out the problems and let's give them a solution that will fix things.
Right.
So through limited, the use of a phone app. If you log onto your phone rather than the equipage requirements and the 400-foot limitation from the control station, you could just log on your phone or log on your computer before you went out and fly, and say, look, I'm Matt Ruddick. I'm going to be at this location for the next 2 hours, and you hit a button and it puts this temporary bubble around you.
And here's the thing about that, for the more than a year now, that system has already been in place with Lance.
Pretty much.
And I can speak from experience. I've used Lance. I've used it often. It's very straightforward. It's very easy. It's very, it's not a big touch point for me.
Sure.
If I want to go fly, well, let me just set up a quick thing in whatever app that I want to use at that point in time. And it's approved instantaneously. I get to go fly, no problem. A service like that is not a big deal in my mind if it still worked that same way. It's been proven that works, but what they're suggesting is a little bit more complicated than that, it sounds like.
It is, and rather than these suppliers who, I'm not a designer of software or anything like that, but to make that app a feasible solution seems much easier to me, just through common sense, than having every manufacturer across the country change the way that they're building aircraft and transmitters.
Right.
That was a discussion that the ASTM standards body had when they were developing the standards for remote ID, was an app-based solution. We think that still is the best option out there. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of support from a number of organizations in the UAS industry and manned industry. So that's something that we'll be asking for, Don't require these types of standards on the aircraft. Mm-hmm. Certainly not for the limited. Right. For the standard remote ID where you're doing beyond line of sight operations, that's different. But there needs to be a distinction made between beyond line of sight operations and line of sight operations, right. Because the operator of the aircraft can be easy to be found typically if they're flying line of sight. So right. Let's focus on a software-based solution that someone can easily use, that doesn't require a lot of certification and standards on manufacturing, and gives us more than that 400-foot restriction that's right. currently found in the limited.
So I guess the next question to kind of clarify for folks is, what do we as the AMA see as a recreational pilot's best option? I mean, obviously, none of these are good options.
No, that's
and we want things to be changed, sure. obviously. But as it stands right now, I kind of believe that none of them really work for recreation.
I mean, if you guaranteed you've got a great relationship with your landowner, you have a flying site, and you can remember to renew the MOU with the FAA, and they never come to you and say you're now a safety concern and we want to remove your site from this exemption process, and okay, but like you said, there's really not a great option here as is. The good news is, these things are changeable. As I mentioned, it's early. We're already getting a number of comments with the FAA, people submitting comments. The industry seems to be pulling together. I hope that continues. I've had great conversations with tons of organizations and manufacturers over the last couple of weeks, and everybody's on board. Everybody's willing to help. So I think we need changes. I don't like any of these options for our community. So let's hope we can get those changed.
So let's move over to another topic that people are bringing up alongside of this, which is registration.
Sure.
Because we're a number of years into the registration process that the FAA put into effect. Does this in any way affect that registration process?
It does. So registration will be changed under this proposed rule to where now you're required to register each aircraft individually. And that isn't, there's no distinction made between standard, limited, or the
that's no matter what.
Right. That's no matter what. Register each aircraft individually. So that's an issue for us.
Yeah.
Certainly I can see if you're flying beyond line of sight, as I mentioned, under the standard remote ID, probably makes sense. Each aircraft have its own unique identifier. These are flying maybe a mile or two away from the operator. Okay, we get it. But these others that are being flown within line of sight at a fixed flying site location, or even under the limited, that operator is going to be found. He's right there within line of sight of the operator. In one case, under limited, he's going to be within 400 feet of the aircraft.
Right.
So if the true goal is to get back to that operator and to ensure safety and where people are operating. I'm not sure what it matters if you have that same number. It's still under limited. It would still know the location. It would still have the identifier that would link back to you or me or whoever it is.
And the thing that's confusing to me, and I'm sure it's probably just as confusing to you, I would imagine, but I guess I don't know why all of my aircraft, let's say I've got a dozen airplanes. That's not an uncommon situation for a lot of our members. Let's say I've got a dozen airplanes sitting, and I've got to register each one. They all have to have a unique identifiable number so that it can be tracked back to me. But the way it's been so far is I have one number that's assigned to me that goes on all of those planes. I feel like it's the same thing.
Right. Sure.
This is just making it way more difficult and potentially way more expensive.
Yeah, well, sure. And that's an argument that we're going to be making as we move forward. We're going to be creating a specific template for our members. We have a template online now. Members can comment, but we're going to be creating one specifically for registration. So we'd urge everybody to send that comment in, even if you sent one. Go ahead and send that also. But that's just going to be unrealistic. I know someone personally who has just over 100 aircraft, and he said, I can't afford to do it. I don't want to do it. And I don't have the time to sit down on my computer and register 100 in some individual aircraft. And
imagine you got 100 aircraft and you got to register them all at $5 a piece.
Right. That's
$500 just to register your aircraft to fly it. I mean, that is out of the possibilities for a lot of people.
And they do mention that there would be a discount on registration depending on how many aircraft that get registered at a time. Yeah. But we don't know any.
None of those details are out
there. I mean, are you going to start at $5 and then each additional one's a quarter? Or we don't know. I doubt it, but let's see. But regardless, just the task itself is ridiculous.
Right.
And if the FAA is looking for compliance on remote ID, they're not off to a good start when before someone even goes out to fly, they're going to have them sit down and register 50 or 75 or 100 aircraft. I don't know very many people that would comply with that.
Well, I can tell you that, and I'm sure you've seen it too and many of the folks watching and listening. If you're on any of the social media communities out there, there's a large contingency of people that are just saying, I'm not going to comply with this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to fly regardless. And we also don't want that. I mean, we want to be able to comply with laws and regulations as long as those laws and regulations are easy to comply with and make sense.
No, you're exactly right. So, long story short, registration, that they need to go back to the drawing board on that.
Agreed.
Especially for these operations that are within line of sight. We're not flying miles away. We're right here. Mm-hmm. Within visual line of sight of the operator or that person co-located with the operator, if you're flying FPV or something like that.
So that brings us to something else I think falls into, like you mentioned, the FPV side, but it also all the way down to your scratch built, stick of tissue stuff. Home builds. How are home built aircraft affected with these new rules?
So on the certification and manufacturing side of things, it mentions kits, and it says that a kit would have to meet one of the two standard or limited ID requirements if it came with 100% of the parts and the instructions to build it. A lot of kits don't. They'll have quite a few pieces, but to say it comes with 100% and the instructions, they don't. I'm sure there's some, but amateur built would mean that you construct and fabricate 50% of the aircraft is the definition that they give. That is going to be a high hurdle for us to get over. Not very many aircraft are going to be constructed and fabricated 50% by someone at home, unless you're buying chunks of wood, cutting down the frames yourself, things like that.
I mean, answer me this question: does that include, like the engine and everything else?
I don't think so. So we're working with EAA. They went through this in the man community a few years back on amateur built. So they're helping us draft a message. That'll be another template for our members, is focus just on the amateur built portion of this. And we encourage everybody who, even if you don't build yourself, send the comment in for amateur built, because we need to support that community.
Yeah.
That's a lot of innovation.
There may come a day when you are going to want to build.
That's right. So we're working with them on that. But as the language stands right now, it would be extremely difficult to meet that amateur built requirement.
Right.
And we want the building community to continue. But under this rule, the way it is, it would be difficult to do so. And we think it would force a lot of people either to just give it up or to go down the path of I'll just buy an aircraft because it's easier.
Right.
Well,
so in addition to that, how I've seen some things, and I got to be honest, there's a correction that I need to make on myself. I don't think I mentioned on the podcast last week, but on the most recent episode of AMA Air, we were talking about this as we had just gotten kind of the draft of these rules in hand, and I had mentioned about FPV, that how FPV probably would not be allowed under some of these rules. I actually was mistaken on that. I was wrong, because visual line of sight can be satisfied by a spotter.
Right. So that's in Section 349.
Right.
That's in the statute. So that's, thankfully we have that. Congress wrote that
that's law.
into
That's
the mandate to the
changed,
FAA.
yeah.
You can fly without additional certification or authorization from the FAA if you meet those 8 statutory requirements, and one of them is to fly within visual line of sight of you or someone co-located with you. So
the FPV community they're in the same boat as everybody else with
they
regard
are. I mean, they're not, a lot of these, a lot of the FPV guys are building their own aircraft and things like that.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be hard for them to meet that 50% fabrication and construction requirement. So that's going to be a pain.
Yep.
There's going to be a specific FPV template that's coming out. So over the next few days, we're rolling a new template out every few days. And we encourage, even if you're not in that community, support that community. Send that message in. And make sure that their voice is heard to the FAA.
And real quick before we continue on, so we're going to be releasing all these different templates for that's designed for different communities, different points of interest. Where can people go to find these templates and to submit their comments?
So modelaircraft.org/gov is going to lead you to where you need to go.
Okay.
We have some blogs and things like that, but we have links to those on the website. There's one general template that covers pretty much everything right now, but we're going to get more granular as we go.
Great. This is a topic that I wanted to talk about. Because I don't feel like it's talked about very much right now. Everybody's very focused on the hobbyists in particular, which is good. But there's a whole series of aircraft manufacturers out there that I think are going to be affected very severely by some of this stuff. Can you talk about what you guys have been seeing and hearing with your discussions with the different manufacturers and retailers?
Sure. So obviously you're right. Manufacturers are concerned. There's a number of requirements they'll have to meet if this would go through as is. Now that would be years down the road, and there's grace periods and things like that. But regardless, at some point, these aircraft would have to have onboard systems and things like that for internet connectivity, to send beacons and signals.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be a lot of hurdles that manufacturers are going to have to jump through. Some small manufacturers are probably at a point right now where they're breaking even or just surviving. If you have to add these additional prices onto a platform that is already at its max price point, it may be hard to sell those aircraft. So manufacturers are concerned. We're having a big meeting with all the manufacturers coming up towards the end of this month, but we're going to start drafting some messages for them and help them have their voices heard. Obviously, it cannot go through as is. And keep manufacturers, the same number of manufacturers we have right now in business. And as there's hobby shops and other people who are in this community. A lot of those are in trouble, and we've seen hobby shops dropping off left and right. If there's one sure way to continue down that path, it would be to keep this as is. So when we draft the messages and for the manufacturers, we'll share that with our community and our members, and we urge them to send those messages as well.
It's so easy to focus on the individual pilots, and like I said, that's an important thing to focus on. But you've got all of these. I mean, these are small businesses all over the country that make their living, creating, manufacturing, selling model aircraft, and I don't see these rules as a way to keep those businesses healthy and continuing on as they have been. So I almost find that almost a little bit more concerning than I do anything else.
It is extremely concerning, and this entire proposal is concerning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to be frank. So, so we want to support each other. I think that's the message we need to get through here. Even though maybe you don't build a home, or maybe you weren't thinking about the manufacturers, go ahead, log on, send that template once we provide it, and get that comment out there to support those others in the community.
Well, and it's something else, and I think I've said this before, maybe on last week's show. Although it's not been quite as bad this time, I know in the past when some of these new regulations have come down, it's been very easy to see a strong divide happen within the hobby community as a whole. And I'm still seeing it a little bit now, although I am seeing a lot more people coming together, and because everybody agrees how bad this really is. Sure. But I think it's important to step back and say, we all have to take this and join together and take this together, because we cannot allow the hobby to go down this path, because it's going to affect all of us. We cannot sit here and say, well, it's this person's fault or that person's fault, or we could, like I think you mentioned on the last show, we can worry about that later.
Right.
This is the time to step up and fight.
We focus all of our efforts on the FAA and changing this proposal. That's key at this point.
Yeah. We talked off air. You mentioned, it's been 10 days. We've already seen about 4,000 comments submitted.
Great number so far. We want that number much, much higher, and I think we'll get there. Mm-hmm. I urge everybody, if you've sent a comment and we start sending out these other templates, go ahead and shoot that off too.
Yeah.
Modelaircraft.org/gov. That is the best way that you can find the information you need. It's got the link to the proposed rule, the link to the Federal Register where you can post your comments, and get on the forums, get on, at your club meetings and things like that. Make sure you talk to everybody and ask them, hey, have you submitted your comment? Because that's important.
It is not the time to give up, folks.
No.
It is absolutely not the time to concede.
There are a lot of support for changing this rule in both the manned and unmanned community. Yeah. Everybody who's got an interest in unmanned aircraft or even manned aviation, they want to see changes to this.
Because this will affect them too.
This will affect them too. Maybe not tomorrow, but down the road, It will affect them. Model aviation is the pipeline to aviation and aeronautical careers. So it will have an impact on everybody. Yep. And they recognize that. And, they're reaching out to me. We're having regular meetings. I'm reaching out to others in the industry, and they want to unite, band together to change that. So I think we're going to see some good things. I do think we'll see some changes, and I think we'll see some good comment numbers at the end of all this.
I agree. I think just from the the amount of posts I see on social media, I got to believe that we're going to see some crazy numbers for those comments. So like Tyler said, get out there, submit your comments, check out those templates that we're going to have up on modelaircraft.org/gov. We're going to make that as easy as we can make it for you to go out and submit your comment to the FAA. And as you said, we filed to have an extension for that too, to make it 90 days. I assume we don't necessarily want people to wait too long, but
I would not. I mean, I know that there's some out there that's saying, "Hey, wait, think through your comments." Great, I agree. The better the comment, the more chance we have of getting this through. If you can point out the problem and provide a sensible solution, that's obviously going to work best at the end. Just don't forget. We're gonna
and we're not gonna let you forget.
We're gonna be reminding everybody, but I understand. Take your time, draft the message you want. Just at the end of the day, don't forget. Hey, I still need to send that comment in. So,
and like I said, we're gonna continue to let you guys know as this goes. We're gonna keep bringing you guys messages like these to kind of keep you updated, keep you informed of this process and what's coming and what's going on, because like everything in government relations, things change.
They change. I'll point out January 23rd is the manufacturer meeting where the manufacturers are coming together with AMA. If you're a manufacturer or a hobby shop, you make or sell products, and you haven't been invited to that, we tried to get everybody, but if we missed one or one slipped through the cracks, please reach out to AMA headquarters here, and we'll get you on the list and get you an invite to that meeting.
Yeah, because this is a time we want everybody's input on this.
Absolutely.
I mean, like I said, we've got to band together. We cannot be divided on this. We have to come at it with a united front. I think
agree.
there's no other way to do it. So, well, Tyler, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day. I know
thanks,
how
Matt.
crazy busy you are. I'm sure you've missed a ton of phone calls just in the time we've been in here. But I also want to thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode of the AMA podcast. As always, if you haven't subscribed, please go do so. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. Go find the one you like the best. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for us on the show, podcast@modelaircraft.org. Email me. We'll take a look at that suggestion. I'll be sure to email you back, let you know I got it. And with that, from everybody here at the AMA, I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you join us next week on another episode of the AMA podcast.